Unfortunately, we have to start off with a topic I think that we all condemn, and of course, that is abuse on social media. All the more disturbing when you recognize that in many ways it's a reflection of people in society. Of course, this all stemming recently from referee Mike Dean receiving death threats on social media, asking to not officiate games that are upcoming, fearing for his safety. And gentlemen, we also know in the last couple of weeks, we've seen arrests. We've seen a 49-year-old man arrested for racially abusing a West Bromwich player. We've seen a 21-year-old man arrested for racially abusing online a Chelsea player. In a recent interview, Wayne Rooney said that by far the biggest challenge facing young athletes these days is social media. And Gareth, before the show yesterday, we were having a spirited conversation about this, because if you are part of a younger generation, you've grown up with social media. For us, the old folks, it might be easy for us to disconnect, but do we need to start preaching that with younger athletes? Hey, I know your age, but do we need to start preaching that with younger athletes? Do we need to slowly start moving them away from social media just for their own emotional well-being as well?
It's a tough issue, isn't it? It's a complex one on a number of different levels, because it's not just yours and mine and these athletes' lives that are affected by what's happening in the digital world. It's the clubs themselves. Like, the clubs inherently benefit by selling ad space, promoting their brand through a number of their own social media channels. So while it brings a lot of good, at the same time, there's the negative, there's the unsavory part about it as well. And now the question is, what needs to be done here? And if I'm a club and my players are experiencing abuse like this, and there's no signs, Andy, that things are going to dissipate, because there are people who are racist, there are people that are intolerant, there are people that are invested through gambling, and gambling's intertwined with the game as well. And when they're disappointed in a result, doesn't go their way, they're going to spout off and say inappropriate things as well. I don't know how you can separate the two worlds, but if I'm the clubs, instead of, putting out one-liners or trying to pressure the tech companies and the governments who you can't rely upon to get anything done on this front, I think you need to consider logging off. Whether you as a brand decide how you want to use your channels and maybe veer away from some of the more negative ones like Twitter. It might come down to that, Andy. And as for the players, if I'm their agent, if I'm anyone providing guidance, I would tell them, look, being a professional athlete, you might have to deal with some of this stuff. It doesn't make it right, doesn't make it acceptable, but log off. Just don't have an account. And if you do, make sure your mentions are turned off. Make sure that account is monitored by someone else. There isn't that one-on-one contact. I just think that we've gone down a rabbit hole and we're far too deep now. And now you're unearthing all these, all the negative sides of the situation. But I think the clubs themselves need to take upon bigger roles in snuffing some of this stuff out and setting proper guidelines for not only the club, but their employees as well.
And this is a new way of abusing players, because let's also call a spade a spade. Before the day and age of social media, players were still subjected to abuse. So this is the new world that teams, that the leagues find themselves in, and having to protect their players. So I guess, Ollie, where do teams go from here? And speaking of disengaging, I guess the most recent player that we know of is Brighton's Aaron Connolly. He just shut all of his social media accounts down because of abuse that he was recently receiving because of gambling, Gareth, right? Missed a goal where a lot of people had a 2-0 score line there. So, Ollie, where do you think they go with this as far as disengaging, and where do teams also go in protecting their athletes?
Yeah, it's so difficult, right? Because my solutions would be in a lot of ways the same as Gareth's there, but those aren't really solutions. Telling players to log off or to turn off their mentions or to have someone manage their account, having the social media companies kind of clean up their own websites more quickly than they do currently. They're not solutions, they're just kind of avoidance. The abuse is still there, it still exists. Right, and so how you actually go about, how any of these teams, leagues, so on, go about actually solving the problem, I don't have the answers to that, and I don't think many people do, right? It's, as you said at the start, Andy, I do think it reflects society more widely. It's not just football. We have this combination of fierce tribalism and division in I think in a lot of Western countries that we haven't seen before. combined with social media and this totally instant and open and anonymous and unaccountable means of communication. So how you go about solving this problem is a huge issue that goes beyond soccer. You know, some people may advocate for anonymity to be banned on social media, but then there's a lot of actually positive aspects of being able to express yourself freely online in a lot of different countries around the world that maybe don't have that kind of freedom of speech, right? So it's so complicated. You'd like to see clubs and leagues be proactive and do something, but what that is, I think they probably feel a bit helpless as well in not having those answers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and right now we've been hearing a lot of pressuring the tech companies to do more to, erase hate. Also, government and law enforcement, make it criminal harassment. You know, the severe punitive measures, pockets can bleed, and that usually hurts the most. So whether it's lifetime bans from being able to go to games, whether it's massive fines, or fines, excuse me, I'm not saying $500, right? You wonder if that's usually a start. But either way, this is something that I have a feeling we're going to be discussing a lot more on the show, unfortunately, because this is something that's in our lives. Social media has become, a fabric, and it's been, as you mentioned, Gareth, a way to make money and advertise, right? So how do we incorporate it in our lives without subjecting ourselves to threatening messages and times where you actually feel like your life is being threatened and you don't want to go to work?